The cannibal subgenre is an infamous but crucial part of the history of Italian horror cinema. Today, I want to tackle a subject many of us like to avoid. Are we immoral for liking these films? I'm the Italian Horror Guy, and this is the Italian Horror Guy podcast. So I think it's important that I start off here by one acknowledging there's a slight clickbaity element to the way I've presented this, and I am trying to get some listens to the podcast, so I hope you'll forgive me. But I think this is actually a topic that's crept up on me steadily over a period of time. I think it's when it comes to morality and things that we're okay with in films, I think it's very easy to, regardless of what side of the spectrum that you sit on, it's very easy to dismiss the other side as hand wringing or being completely dismissive or uncaring. And I think I want to say straight off the bat that this isn't a pointing the fingers thing, more an acknowledgement of discomfort, I think, on my part, and also the fact that if fandom of a certain kind of art or a certain kind of cinema requires that you just simply dismiss things that you probably wouldn't dismiss in any other aspect of your life, you're probably, in my opinion, being slightly dishonest. I think that's how I'd put it. And to put an earlier and fine point on this, I don't think that the cannibal subgenre would actually have fandom if it wasn't for its inherently controversial nature. Because if you think about it on a very surface level of psychology, why are we interested in them if not at least for the controversial nature of them to some extent? So I think I'll move through maybe various cannibal films, probably the most cornerstone ones and ones with particularly controversial scenes and moments in them. But I really don't want this to come across as some kind of like greater than thou thing. I think it's really about trying to break into this conversation in an honest way, because I really think that thoughts like these around as I said, controversial art, they can be made just and always are made far too simplistic, to the point that it defeats sort of any kind of discussion. And I think it deserves a bit of discussion. I think it's worthwhile exploring what is so interesting about these kinds of films. So I'll just read briefly from an article here on Fangoria by a guy called Sammy Wilborn. It says, at 14 years old, I was scrolling through, what's the name of the article? The Ethics of the Cannibal Film. Okay. He says, at 14 years old, I was scrolling through YouTube and a related video came up, the most controversial movie ever made, with an image of red collective violence, and an image of red collective violence caught my eye. I didn't know what I was letting myself in for, but it became a moment that would shape my mind more than I realize even now. I've long been fascinated with humanity's propensity for violence. Is it inherent? An insatiable need to consolidate power through instilling fear? Is it the thing we connect to the most? Or is it drummed into us as children? Are we merely products of governments and institutions that have been built on blood-soaked soil? So I think, especially the first bit of that, the most controversial movie ever made, it's obviously referring to Cannibal Holocaust, but I think I think it's probably for your listeners, it's probably worth reflecting on your relationship with that film or this particular subgenre, or maybe even more broadly, horror films, and consider whether it is the case. And I'm being a little bit presumptive here. That consider to what extent you were drawn to it because of such controversial things, right? Because I wonder if there's a certain rite of passage, if you like, to being like, I can deal with this. I can deal with this film. This is fantastic. Or oh, look at all these people. They can't watch. They can't watch this. There's a certain I'd say misplaced, if you like, sense of achievement about it. But I think what I find most uncomfortable about this fact is I would I think I proudly, to the extent that it's worthwhile, wear on my sleeve that I'm a big horror fan. I'm an Italian horror fan, um, but I don't think I would go into any level of detail on what the Cannibal film is, aside from it being quite obvious. It doesn't necessarily advertise itself for the fact that there are animal murders and that kind of thing in the films, but I I do think though that level of controversy sort of it's inherent and inbuilt into the nature of what these films actually were. So let's go back to the mother of the Italian Hannibal cannibal film, Man from the Deep River. And what I was shocked, and I think I've done episodes on this in the past, and they're actually some of the most popular episodes. So just keep in mind, I'm likely going to do some episodes in the coming weeks that are dedicated to individual cannibal films again. So listen out for those, or look out for those, and then listen to them. But when I did that particular series, and I'm sure I acknowledged it at the time, um, I was genuinely quite shocked at how good I actually find these films. Like I find them genuinely good, but it's not it's not in spite of the controversies or in spite of the um, probably immoral or possibly immoral aspects of them. And it's not actually just because of them either. I think it's a collective. There's an eeriness to these films that I don't think just about any other films in history have. And if you extracted that eeriness, they simply wouldn't be. Frankly, I don't think they'd still be worth talking about today. They would just be films with stuff happening. Um, so I'll go straight for the I guess the most controversial aspect of Man from the Deep River. So um, there's a ferret and snake. I think it's a ferret like thing, and snake fight. Um, where I believe both animals are tied up and they fight each other basically to the death. Um, and it's pretty hard to watch. And in the case of that particular film, because I don't think that Man from the Deep River is the most uncomfortable of all of these films, but in the case of that particular scene, it's so unbelievably unnecessary in the state of the film. Now, there's it's probably worth mentioning that as the the mother of this genre, it doesn't anticipate the genre becoming a really strong or semi-successful venture, and it's quite clear that this film has pretensions to something greater. I think it's the what is it? The Dances with Wolves, the Last Samurai setup of white man goes into exotic culture, thinks they're a bunch of savages, and slowly immerses himself in that culture. The problem, of course, though, is that to some extent they are savages, and I think this is one element of the cannibal film that is so hard to stomach, pardon the pun, because the people, or some of the people who are naturally defensive of these films, like, yes, it's making a great point. It's doing this, it's doing that, and I think I've indicated on this podcast and enough times that I think I do love Cannibal Holocaust for what it is broadly, but obviously I have some troubles with it. But I really do think that the "I wonder who the real cannibals are" quote at the end is like very. I don't know if overrated is the right term, but it's like I think the film undermines the quote because it's quite obvious that it's like a um, it's it's a rhetorical question, right? It's we are the real cannibals because it then cuts to the shot of the big skyscraper in New York and blah blah blah. But then it's like it's at odds with the film that I just watched because the morality of the film, in the context of Vietnam and all that, it's suggesting that well the media is the real problem and the fact that we want to watch blah 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 blah, and it's like yeah, all of that I agree. Fine, we're evil, we're horrible for wanting to watch things and we the way we treat these cultures and the way we blah 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 blah. But I think it probably accidentally makes a point about the Vietnam War as well, for all the relevance that film has to the Vietnam War. That actually can still probably be noted about like really far left political beliefs and people nowadays is you can get so distracted by how evil we are that fuck me, there are still bad things happening. In other parts of the world. So I think because of the whole, oh, well, it was such an unnecessary war, Vietnam, I think people actually have blinded themselves to the evil that was going on there outside of America's influence. Now, obviously, that's getting a little bit too political, but in the context of Cannibal Holocaust, the I wonder who the real cannibals are is an interesting quote in a movie that we've just seen where, well, mate, they're the real cannibals. We saw them being cannibals. And as much as look at all these horrible things that the white man went and did to this culture, are we defending what this culture was doing to each other? It's like so I think it sort of undermines itself. And I think that is also probably worth mentioning. And I actually, that all sounds like a big criticism, and maybe it is, but I don't mean it entirely critically. And this next point, I don't necessarily mean critically either. But some of the greatness of these films is accidental, right? And part of it is that if you're going to create this film with not big name directors, very little budget, absolutely no name actors for the most part, uh, you don't necessarily have a plan. It's sort of it's gun for hire. It's let's make some money if we possibly can with very little type stuff. So to some extent, the fact that things are just happening in these films is actually what I think ends up making them great, often inadvertently. So the truth of going back to Man from the Deep River, the truth of that film is I actually think that from a plot perspective, it probably encapsulates the pretensions of the future of the cannibal film by there's very clearly a point to the plot, right? Like very, very, very clearly. It's trying to suggest that once you get to know these people, or people live in different cultures, and they make a point of Ivan Rasimov's character being already a bit lost in the sort of Thai culture. All of that feels a bit off to him. But also from memory, I don't know that the generalized way that the tribe or whatever you'd call them in Man from the Deep River is necessarily unbelievably immoral. And if you go to, or at least compared to say Cannibal Holocaust, but you go back to the start of the film, there's a grittiness that the film's trying to. It's a sort of every man for himself survival type thing. So I think at the very start of the film, he's attending a boxing match, which um, has that sense of survival and violence, and I think it's linked to that snake versus ferret thing. And the other side of that scene is what is look the the obvious point that is made, right? There's this back and forth of points around animal deaths in these movies, and I find it very tedious, right? So on the one hand, you might say, well, we kill animals for food all the time, right? Which I think is a disingenuous defense. But I think that the counter is just as disingenuous. The counter is something like, yes, but people do that for food. You shouldn't be killing animals for art. Now, there's merit to both of these points, but I think they're both wrong. Okay? This is the you've made it, guys. This is the crux. This is the thing that ultimately inspired me to do this episode. In my opinion, it is not a sufficient defense to say, well, you guys are killing animals for food all the time, blah, blah, blah. Okay, the reason that I don't think that's a defense, there's a couple of reasons. One is, well, when we're killing animals and putting it on movies, that's not what we're doing. Okay, so that's not what's actually happening. But the other thing is about it, people do not seek out watching slaughterhouse stuff, or at least as far as I'm aware. I'm sure some do, but not many. People don't seek out watching slaughterhouse stuff for the fascination of, well, look, this is how we make meat. People seek out these cannibal movies specifically because they know that they're wrong and because they know that they're controversial. Or I'll take back the know that they're wrong. Know that they're controversial and that they might be wrong. There's a fascination with the fact that it's wrong, okay? And we all know this. We know this. There's a fascination with Cannibal Holocaust because it's wrong or because it's considered wrong. So to then watch it and say, oh, well, it's not wrong, seems a bit disingenuous. However, the other side of it is just as disingenuous. The side that says, oh, well, you can't do it for art. The reason that I say it's disingenuous is because, and I think everyone who listens to this, who is a horror film fan, and I'd say everyone who's listening is a horror film fan, because why the hell else would you be listening to this? Everyone who is a horror film fan has dealt with the people getting overly moralistic or moralizing about films that they don't like or scenes from films that they don't like. And I've worked out, I've probably said it many times on this podcast before, I've worked out, I'm quite sure the line of when people will start saying things like, you can't do this for art, blah, 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 is wherever it happens to be that they arbitrarily get offended, right? So here's the thing. I think there are certain things that you could quite reasonably say cross a line of acceptability, such as, killing animals for art. I think that is a very obvious one that people on that side can probably reasonably make a point. However, when they say you can't do it for art, I don't think that's so much the problem, because when you say you can't kill animals for art, but you can kill them to eat, from the animal's perspective, they don't care. They don't want to be killed either way. So killing them is immoral. That's what you're saying. That's what you believe, right? Now you can say, "Oh, it's not." Yeah, but it's moral to eat them, but it's not moral for art. But I'm quite convinced the point at which they think it's immoral is the point at which they don't want to watch it. Right? It's that simple. Because I guarantee people like that, if they were to watch things happening in a slaughterhouse, they would suddenly find that immoral. So it's not about what they actually find immoral. It's about what they can deal with, right? And I guess this comes back to the, well, what can I deal with thing? And I don't know. So I guess I've gone on a little bit of a rant there, but I hope I would actually be genuinely interested in people's thoughts, and I strongly encourage people to comment on the episode. I'd love to spark a little bit of a discussion, and please keep it civil. I think I like sparking debate and I like sparking thought, but I don't like getting people riled up just for the sake of it. I'm not a chaos person like that, but I do think it's worth consideration. Okay, but so that's the directly controversial side of things. Okay, and it's a difficult thing. I honestly think it's a difficult thing, and I think I think as fans or viewers of the cannibal subgenre, I think we instinctively have a defense mechanism, right? And why these films are okay. And I think we're too convincing about it to ourselves. You know, the truth of the matter is that there just has to be more to it than simply, well, I can deal with it, or it's fine, it's art. Because that's the thing. Let's really get into this, right? Is it art? So I think I'll move to, let's go Jungle Holocaust briefly, because there's another, and then I'll finish up with a brief discussion around Cannibal Ferox. I think I was gonna shift towards Cannibal Holocaust structurally, but I already did, so it's cool. I think to some extent, Jungle Holocaust is, and there's a good chance you guys are less familiar with it, but it's definitely worth checking out. It's probably, without Jungle Holocaust, you probably don't get Cannibal Holocaust. In fact, you almost definitely don't. There's a very extended alligator murder, and like sort of what I just mentioned before, that it's the point for me that I'm watching this and it's very uncomfortable to watch. And when I'm watching it, my brain's instinctively going, this is wrong. But there are other animal deaths that I don't instinctively think that, because I can deal with watching them. And how arbitrary is that? I mean, alligators are assholes, but it's very difficult to watch. And there's a very discomforting nature about this whole film, Jungle Holocaust. And I've always been fascinated by the murder and eating of Mimi Lay, or Lai, however you say it. It's very beautiful. She seems to be naked for the whole film, and she eventually gets caught. And there's the scene where all the cannibals, they catch her, they cut her up, they carve her up, and they eat her. And there's this beautiful score playing. I'll play it now. And I remember when I was watching this, probably for the first time, I was quite emotionally overcome by the whole thing, and I didn't know what to do with it. And then it's like they added this layer of beauty to this absolutely disgusting thing, and to this day I don't know what to do with it. And it's like, is that controversial as well? Is that wrong? Because, you know, I think it's a little crass or a little simplistic to say, oh, well, there's a murder of an alligator. There's them cutting up a turtle and eating it, and to say, oh, well, that's just art. Where I think you could quite easily argue that it's not. But with this scene, it's like it definitely has pretensions of art. It's presenting itself in an artistic way, and it's like just about the most disgusting, awful, evil thing that you could put into a movie, and yet it's presented artistically, and that's a really difficult thing. So now moving on to Cannibal Ferox. I think, and I've mentioned this on the previous Cannibal Ferox episode, and I both encourage you to listen to that, but also encourage you to listen to the upcoming, most likely upcoming Cannibal Ferox episode. This film is probably rightly, but partially wrongly, just seen as they're cashing in on Cannibal Holocaust. Now, it's rightly seen that because that is what they're doing. But I just wonder if your whole goal to make people uncomfortable, if that is basically your whole goal, how can we make people as uncomfortable as possible? This film delivers that in spades. And then again, the part of that is hard to deal with is, well, how do we make people uncomfortable? Well, you add a sort of gritty realness to it. And of course, there's animal deaths in this as well. I'm not going to go into detail again. But it's like, I've always found there's that moment where they get to the village and there's no one there. There's almost never been an eerier feeling in a movie that I've ever seen. I mean this quite genuinely. It was when I watch this, I always feel like, fuck me, this is it's like terrifyingly eerie. It's so I don't know if it's brilliant, right? But I guess the point is, we love these movies for a reason. There's a certain feeling that they evoke. There's a certain quality to it. There are things that have to happen in this film or in these films for it to actually feel like that. And if you take out the brazenly controversial things, the animal killings, the unnecessarily naked people, the griminess of it all, if you take that away, then we don't have the eeriness, right? And how a piece of art makes you feel is surely ultimately what makes it art in the first place, right? It's I guess it's a creative piece of work in so much as it is creative, that is designed to make people feel a certain way. So I guess in that sense, cannibal films have to be considered art, even if there are controversial elements in them that aren't necessarily artistic. And I think I'm probably giving the indication that I've got an answer for you to the question, are we immoral for liking these films? And the truth is, I don't have an answer. Because as much as I've probably given some kind of reasonable defense of both sides of the position, but as a person that watches them, you can probably garner that obviously I'm on the side of, or closer to, no. But the truth is, it's not an episode I would have done if I was confident on the answer. It's something that I'm actually a little bit uncomfortable about. Because the thing is, there are certain films that you wouldn't watch with your friends or your family because you know they wouldn't like them. There's certain music you wouldn't listen to because you know they wouldn't like them. But I think for all of us who have people in our lives who know that we like horror films or know we like whatever we like, right? When it comes to cannibal films, I think we wouldn't put them on for those people because we're worried they wouldn't like us. And that doesn't make them right. But I do think that it's worth considering why that is. I do think it's worth considering what is it that makes us attracted to these films? Why is it that we're interested in them? As far as I can tell in myself, it's something like there's an eeriness and a discomfort in them that no other films ever, that I've watched anyway, have been able to create. And if we can boil down our love or interest in horror films to something, it would be something like, I think, what is it? What is the depravity? What kind of depravity are humans capable of? And how do we understand that? How do we deal with that through this sort of medium of film to make us comfortable with it? It's like we're exploring the depths of the deep dark depths of human depravity. And I think the problem with cannibal films, the problem with the controversial things that are in them, is that they probably break the barrier between here's a depiction of the depraved, right? Here's an exploration of the depraved, and here is something that is simply depraved. And that's why I'm uncomfortable. I still like them. I still watch them. That's the reason I'm uncomfortable, though. I hope you've enjoyed this exploration. I hope it wasn't too rambly. And I hope you'll join me for previous episodes and for future episodes. As I said, I'll be doing more episodes about cannibal films coming up. But until then, I'm the Italian Horror Guy, and this has been the Italian Horror Guy podcast.